Please welcome Ilan Barda, CEO and founder at Rataflow, and Ilker Sahin, Director of Informational Technology at BriSA Bridgestone Sabanci, as they present using IEC62443 with data-driven simulation, a case study with BriSA tire manufacturer.
Hi there. Thank you all for joining this session. I know it's a long event with a lot of interesting material, so we'll try to keep it interested for you and hopefully less acronyms than the previous session. So in terms of an overview, we'll start a bit with an overview about what we are doing, and then we will dive to the specific projects that we have done together with BriSA. So Rataflow is a company that is focused on OT security. We provide a complete life cycle for solutions, starting from analyzing your network, discovering the assets, and then doing a risk analytics about what does it mean in terms of what are the assets and what does it mean in terms of their exposure for attacks, and then going back to the level of the monitoring, detecting any anomalies in the network in order for you to be able to take actions. We've been around for a few years, so we have customers everywhere around the world in different verticals, starting from the critical infrastructure, but then moving more and more into the private sector as well. So anything that you have, probably we have seen it before, and we believe that it's quite important when we are doing a project to make sure that we can bring the relevant expertise. So what we have seen more or less in the last year, or probably even closer to 2 years, is that many customers already started their OT cyber journey. They have done the initial discovery of the assets. They have been in such sessions, in such conferences, so they have understood a bit what are the risks and so on. They implemented some security controls, usually whether it's an IDS, some firewalls, as was mentioned before. Usually not on all the sites, not in all the places, just something that will be addressing the key problems. But then in most cases, and in most cases, by the way, by now it's the CISO, from what we see, that is involved in this process, the CISO is actually facing a bigger headache than what he had before, because now he understands more what are the threats, he understands more what are the gaps, and he is also getting a lot of alerts ongoing, so he needs to understand how do we proceed. Usually at this point of time, most of the CISOs, most of the customers are taking a bit of a break and saying, okay, we need to do some planning, which I think it's a good advice. And then in most cases, customers try to use some framework, whether it's the NIST CSF, whether it's the IEC62443. In some countries, there are some other specific directives as well, like the NIS directive in Europe and so on. But these, I think, are the most popular ones. The problem is that both of these standards and the others as well have quite a lot of details. There are hundreds of pages. There are more than 100 security controls, probably about 150. So trying to implement all of it in all of your sites, basically it's impossible. And deciding what you need to do first and what can be deferred in which sites, in which kind of security controls, that's actually quite a complicated exercise. And that's where we are trying to help, and that's what I would like to describe to you today.
Yeah, thank you, Lan. Hello. I will give you a brief summary about the company BriSA. BriSA is the joint venture company with the Bridgestone #1 tire industry leader in the world, and also one of the biggest company groups in Turkey, Sabancı Group. And we are leader in the Turkey market, and also exporting our products 87 countries as well. Okay. And we have 2 plants in Turkey, and producing one tire every 2 seconds. And we have different brands, Bridgestone, Lassa, Dayton, Kinesis, and also Autopratic is our service point. And Profleet is our digital solution for fleets. And R12 is the, leader telematic solution in Turkey. And BriSA is acquired the company last year. And this is the statistics about the IT team. With the more than 50 people, we are handling lots of applications and solution. We are handling this workload with the agile methodology. And for the conceptual parts, I think you all know better than me. With the 4.0 transformation, we have changed many things. The most changing thing is that in the previous versions, we have layers and connecting with them with the defined rows. But in Industry 4.0, everything is connected, not only inside of them, they are also connected with the world. So it changed everything in terms of security especially. I'm defining the isolated traditional network architecture as a castle actually. We were living for the manufacturing side, we were living in a castle and we have always fighted outside of the walls or on the walls. But we are now opening many gates to the world and we have to gain muscles to fight in the walls as well. Of course, we are not against the new solutions and the new technologies, but every new solution came up with its unique problems and vulnerabilities. We have to define them and take counteractions. So we are not only connecting with the factories, also with the supply chain and third parties as well. This slide shows our roadmap. Mainly I'm showing the top managers in this slide. All the new technologies are like, I'm describing it as sailboat. All the new technologies are winds. And when we use it in our processes and products and empowering people, we go faster and we can drive to the future. But if we have any problem in the performance loops, we can get slowed down or even we can stop. But if we consider the infrastructure, it is meaning more than going forward. So it is very critical for us in terms of business continuity. So what was our drivers and what are the challenges? First of all, like all the other production sites, we want to assure our manufacturing continuity. And of course, we want to support digital solutions, new digital solutions, but eliminating their risks. And we want to protect our data processes. And to protect this environment, we have to define risks very well, including the cybersecurity risk and counteractions. While working this, we want to comply all the related regulations or frameworks. What are the necessary? The challenges are, the first question is very important, where to start, because it is very complex. Current systems are complex and it's getting more and more complex. There are shortages, of course, considering the knowledge skills. And of course, none of the companies have the unlimited resources, so we have to prioritize our investment. Involvement of the business units are also another issue. And last but not least, of course, how to measure to maintain the same security level is one of our challenges. Thank you. Ilan?
So as Ilker presented, this is where they were and this is where we were actually contracted by BriSA in order to try and help them and see how we do some planning, what are the things that are more important, what are the places that needs to be prioritized and so on and so forth. What we did is that we use a process in line with all the typical types of risk assessment process. This process, we are usually doing it based on our tool on the Chiara in order to make sure that this process is consistent. So if you will run it 10 times, you will get to the same results with the same situation, and not every time you will get a different consultant and you will get different views. So we go through this process. I will describe the steps in the next few slides. But first of all, the thing that is very important is to define the SUC, the system under consideration. What is the scope of the assessment? And afterwards also to do some detailed mapping. Usually we start with some architectural drawings that the asset owner has, and then you are going and doing some detailed discovery in the site itself. And usually this is an iterative process, and also in our project, Once we started the actual discovery, we found all kinds of additional sub-networks, and we had to discuss together whether this is covered by the assessment, whether this will be out of the scope, whether this will be assessed in a different way, and so on and so forth. So it is an iterative process, and in general, most of the steps here needs to have some iteration, so it is something that needs to be clarified before we start between the consultant and the customer, that there will be some iterations. So it's something that kind of set the expectations from both sides. I will describe the next steps in the next few slides. But what is important is also that there is a need for a lot of collaboration between the business people, between the experts in the site, and between the consultant. The consultant doesn't know what does it mean, each of the business processes, each of the devices, and so on. On the other end, and we have seen it also in this project, the people in the factory are always busy. There are always not enough people. They always have all kinds of other crises, other challenges. There is always something happening there. So it is our responsibility to make sure that we minimize the requirements from the customers, to make sure that we structure it as much as possible in advance, saying, this is where we will need some information. You can send it to us offline. This is where we will need some workshop in order to go together through some activities. This is how we will present, and so on and so forth. So try to make it as much as possible structured in terms of what will be the interaction and the required resources, because that's always a challenge. So in terms of going through some of the details, as said, after you do the definition of the system under consideration, you are using discovery. I think you have seen many of these tools around here, and there are many ways to do it. What we are trying again to do to make it easy for the customer, assuming that we are not talking about a small site and not even about one site, we need to try and make it simple. So if you have an IDS installed, then you can give us a report from the IDS, or you can give us a recording of the traffic. That's perfect. If not, anything else would be fine as well. So any partial types of information, whether it's network traffic, whether it's firewall logs, anything else, whether it's a CMDB, whether it's an Excel with the assets, anything that you can provide. Again, the idea is to find the balance between the quality of the data and the resources that you need to allocate in order to do it. In many cases, the project can just stop on this phase because the customer will not have the resources, and then the project can just stop forever. So we are trying to be more flexible and see what we can work with and give you the level of the assurance in terms of the quality of the results according to the depth. In this case, we were able to install our IDS, so we were able to get very high quality types of information. What is important is that after you are getting the detailed network map with all the assets, all the connectivities, you need to go a bit more to the high level. You cannot analyze 1,000 devices and, 10,000 or 20,000 connections. You need to understand what are the groups of the devices according to the business process. Eventually, the business is the one that defines the importance, what are the crown jewels, and so on and so forth. So after we go into the detailed map, we go to a grouping of the devices together with the business people to understand what are the groups, and then to get to this kind of drawing, having less connections and less groups of devices. After we have done this kind of mapping and understanding the environment, the next step is trying to focus again on the key devices. You cannot analyze, because then afterwards we will go through attack flows. You cannot do an analysis of attack flows, not even for 20 business groups and, 100 links between these groups. This is basically almost endless. So you do need to prioritize. You do need to select where are your crown jewels, what are the critical assets. So the way that we are doing it, and this is a typical process for a risk analysis, we go through the risk scenario. We are trying to select the worst case scenario. So this is the place where we do need the customer. Only the customer, only the operational people in most cases will know what does it mean for them in terms of the site, what are the production lines that are more critical, what are the groups of devices that are more critical, what kind of a system, maybe it's one computer that if it stops, everything stops, and so on and so forth. So that's the time that we need the customer in order to analyze this. So we have this kind of an Excel where you enter this information. Usually it's done in a workshop, so it's not sending it to the customer, just fill this information. We want to do some of the questioning. So we are doing it in a joint workshop. You will see at the end, it was quite a big workshop that we have done together. And after we fill this information, in order to have something that is manageable, we try to select between 5 and 10 worst case scenarios, the things that we really want to focus on, and make sure that we are addressing them, making sure that we are resolving them. After we are doing this kind of worst case scenario, the output will be the key devices. What are the devices that you need to protect? And then we are doing attack flow analysis. The problem in many cases is that you are trying to do vulnerability analysis and patch management and all that stuff. In most cases, you will not be able to do patching for many of these devices. This was also the case in this project. And in some other cases, it's not really important. If this device is some Windows XP, but it's behind some data diode, then it's fine. So it is important to look on the flow of the attack, starting from the points of the initial access and getting to your critical devices. And this is probably the most important, the most intensive part of the process, to make sure that we are analyzing all the flows and finding the places where are the most critical. So the way that we are doing it is, this is where our tool, the Kiara, is coming into play. We are feeding everything into the Kiara, the information about the network, the connectivities, the groups, the priorities, everything is inside there. The Kiara has information about all the attackers, so we select the relevant attackers in terms of the industry, in terms of the geography. Then we map it into the TTPs, into the tactics, and then we run a simulation. You don't do a pen test on a manufacturing, on an OT network, so you do it in a virtual way. You run the simulation from the initial access points that are either external to the internet, to the IT network, between the sites and so on, or some third party that is being introduced into the network, some technicians and so on. From the initial access points to the critical devices, we run all the simulations using the vulnerabilities, using the tactics and so on, and we end up with some scoring. And eventually this is where we get the risk score for each device, for each group of devices, and for the overall network. We get the cyber risk score, and then we are going back to the customer discussing what is the tolerable risk for each of these groups of devices, what is acceptable in terms of the customer, in terms of potential damage. If you are looking on the IEC62443, they have what is called the SLT, and they have the way to calculate it. So looking between the risk and the tolerable risk, there is this table where you can calculate the SLT. But if you are reading the standard deep enough, and also it makes a lot of sense, just using this kind of a one number for all of your network, or even for parts of your network, is very inaccurate and very, I would say, not useful. Because every part of the network will require some other measures, whether it depending on the domain, depending on some after factors. So in most cases also, if you read the standard, the SLT should actually be a vector of all of the FRs, all of the categories of the security controls, and then it's something that is more accurate, something that you can tune in a better way. After the last thing, after we do this definition of the SLT, if you are using the IEC62443, output is the security controls in each of these groups. We are also doing it in some cases with some best practices. We have defined our own 25 best practices for security controls, similar to the SANS Top 20 and some others. So depending on the level of the granularity that the customer wants, and whether they want to be fully compliant with the 62443, or whether they want something that is a bit more easy to digest, we can select different classes, also the NIST in that case. And then the output is eventually what are the security controls that you need to implement in the different places. And because the calculation of the attack vectors is automatic, then you can just rerun the system with a what-if scenario. If I implement these security controls, what does it mean in terms of my cyber risk? If I implement some partial set of security controls, what does it mean in terms of my cyber risk, and so on and so forth. So that's the place where also the automation helps you to do this planning, because, again, it's all about doing these iterations in order to get to the relevant, optimized plan for your case.
I think this works.
This works?
This works. Thank you. As we are discussed, actually we have worked in detail on the field in the production area and defined all the things. And it is not just a solution, digital solution implementation actually. It's a service that give direct feedback and give not general but specific recommendations actually, including segmentation, zone definitions, or to get prepared for the worst case scenarios. It is all included, and these all outputs. I will not get through all of them one by one, but also considering all the landscape and all the environment, it was crucial to define all the risks and all the contractions considering these risks. Another topic is we set up the governance model as well, including the procedures, policies, and responsibility. It was very important for us. Also, we not just only increased our maturity considering the OT security, we have also increased the awareness all the business units considering these threats. And for the next steps, we will going to focus on more incident responses, of course, and we want to integrate with our SOCs. But the last part is very important. Continuity is very important. We want to maintain our level. It is just like a bodybuilding. If you stopped and you are getting worse, even to keep the same level, you have to spend effort and resource. So we are looking at this as a continuous process, continuous improvement process. And we will
just maybe a few points to emphasize on what Ilker was saying from what we have seen from this process and some others. As Ilker was mentioning, we gave the very concrete list of security controls that needs to be implemented. As we are all the time discussing, it should be something very concrete, very actionable, and very specific to this site, not just saying, okay, you better implement some firewalls, but something that is very specific because every network eventually is different. The other thing, as Ilker mentioned, is part of the recommendations is not just about technology, not just about putting some security controls, but also some policies, having the right governance model and so on. In many cases, this is overlooked, and this is something that is very important. And the last thing, as Ilker was mentioned, it's not a one-time exercise. We finished the process, we gave the recommendations, but everything is changing all the time. The devices are changing, the vulnerabilities are changing, the attackers are changing, and of course the security controls that you implement are changing. The system is very dynamic, so it is something that you need to do on kind of a continuous process. Continuous doesn't mean that you need to do it every day. If you get to the level that you do it on a quarterly basis, I would say that's great. If it's semi-annual or annual, that's also good, but I would say the target in most cases should be a quarterly basis. That should be sufficient in order to reassess the landscape and see whether there needs to be some adjustments.
Yeah. For example, I want to give an example. We have started to implement heat pump in our plant, and all engineering team came us to, and let's look at the security point of view for the project. It is one of awareness results. And we have achieved this result with the crowded team, dedicated and hardworking team. I want to thank them all in front of you, and thank you for listening to us. Thank you.
If there are any questions, please. Yes, please.
Can you talk a little bit about threat relevancy and some of the parameters that you use? Because I can imagine a lot of different ways.
Yeah, so actually this is part of where we are using the system, the Chiara. The Chiara has a database which we are updating all the time about all the threat actors and the tactics that they are using. And for each of them, we also have some relevancy parameters, which industry they are addressing, which geographies, and so on and so forth. So when we are doing the simulations of the attack flows, we are selecting the relevant vertical, and we are selecting the relevant geography, and this comes out as what are the relevant attack vectors. You can, of course, tune it all the time, so everything You can also manually override the system and say, I want to take into account everything just to be on the safe side, or I want to take maybe just one new attacker that was published this quarter. So everything is eventually can be overridden in a manual way. But we are doing this relevancy automated in the system, and then we are taking just the group of the tactics of these relevant attackers and running them as the simulation from the initial access point to the critical assets. Any other questions? Okay, so we are out there. By the way, we have a booth just in the main hall, so you are welcome to come and see the system, to come ask any questions, to discuss any of the specific challenges, and hopefully you have enjoyed this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.